phantom hitchhiker on Highway 47. She whispers your name as she fades from the back seat, and you realize you never hit the brakes. That's how drivers describe the chilling moment the phantom hitchhiker disappears. And no matter how many times people tell this story, one thing never changes: the look of pure terror on the face of those who saw her. This legend haunts Highway 47 near Tom Hill, where multiple locals claim to have picked up a young woman wearing a torn white dress, barefoot with long dark hair. She looks lost, she looks scared, she always gives an address near the cemetery. Then somewhere along the drive, she vanishes, leaving behind an icy cold seat, the scent of wet earth, or sometimes a personal item like a scarf or a bracelet. One driver claimed he found the scarf on a headstone the next morning. Now this isn't just a ghost story passed around for laughs. Police logs and community message boards over the years show consistent reports of a girl seen walking alone late at night on that same stretch of road. Some call it folklore, others are convinced she's real. They say she was a teen that was unalived in a hit and run while fleeing an abusive relationship decades ago, and she's still looking for someone to get her home safely. The most terrifying part? Well, many drivers say they felt fine at first until she whispered something that made no sense at all, something like, "He's still out there," and then vanishes. No trace, no sound, just silence, followed by a sense of overwhelming dread that stayed with them for days. La Mala Hora. Now you're driving alone, it's close to midnight. Suddenly, a figure appears in the road, tall, shrouded in black, unmoving, you can't see her face. Your headlights flicker, you hit the brakes, but everything freezes. You try to scream, but nothing comes out. Well, that's La Mala Hora, the evil hour. Now this horrifying entity appears in remote parts of New Mexico, particularly along back roads near the Rio Grande. Now witnesses say she manifests as a shadowy woman with a veil, or as a shifting black mist. Now her presence is an omen. If you see her, something terrible is about to happen, and if she gets close to you, there's literally no turning back. Now one woman driving back from Santa Fe describes seeing La Mala Hora standing at a crossroad, her black cloak kind of billowing despite the still air. She didn't stop, but when she got home, she found out her brother had passed away right around the exact same time that she passed the spirit. The earliest known versions of this legend date back to the early 1900s. Some believe La Mala Hora is a demon, others think, she's the spirit of a woman who lost her children to war or plague and now punishes those who cross her path. Whatever she is, the stories all agree on one thing: she shows up right before someone passes away, and she never appears twice to the same person. The demon dog skinwalker of La Cruces. Now it wasn't a dog, it wasn't a wolf, it wasn't anything that should exist. That's what Carlos, a 19-year-old college student from La Cruces, said after something chased him through the desert at 2:14 a.m. one night in 2015. He was heading home from a friend's house when he heard heavy footsteps behind him, too fast to be human, too loud to be a dog, so he turned and saw it. Black fur, long limbs, yellow eyes that kind of glowed in the dark. It was running upright and it was laughing. Local folklore calls it the demon dog, but others believe it's just a skinwalker or a shapeshifter from Navajo legend. Now said to be kind of a witch who uses dark magic to become a beast. Now the skinwalker myth is sacred, feared, and rarely spoken of in public, but in southern New Mexico, people have reported seeing creatures that match its description for years. A rancher outside of La Cruces reported finding 14 of his goats mutilated overnight. No red liquid, no footprints. Surveillance cameras recorded only static and a deep growling noise before cutting off completely. When he checked the pen the next morning, the locks were still intact, but the goats were scattered and torn apart as if something flew in and out. Now another local swears the creature followed him home. He saw it standing near the tree line at the edge of his property. That night, his dogs barked non-stop and he heard scratching at his window. In the morning, claw marks were etched into the glass. He moved out a week later. I don't blame him. The demon dog doesn't just, hunt, it kind of plays with you. It mimics your voice, it draws you in, and when you're isolated, scared, and alone, that's when it strikes. The ghost children of Arroyo Seco. Now they play by the riverbank at dusk, barefoot, soaking wet, laughing softly as they skip stones across the surface. And if you get too close, they'll invite you to play. Now locals near Arroyo Seco, just north of Teos, speak of children who haunt a bend in the river. The story goes that in the 1940s, a school bus swerved off a narrow bridge during a really bad storm and crashed into the river. To this day, hikers and locals say they've seen ghostly children by the water, always in very small groups, always near sundown. One man says he heard giggling while he was fishing alone. He turned and actually saw a group of children watching him from the opposite bank. He then waved at them. They actually waved back. Then one of them stepped into the river and then vanished, like without a splash, nothing. Now, another woman was walking her dog when she saw a small barefoot girl standing on the trail. The girl looked lost, so she actually bent down to ask if she needed help. Now, the girl said, "Can you find my bus?" Then disappeared into the trees. Her dog refused to move for several minutes, whining and just shaking uncontrollably. Now, even more disturbing are the stories of people hearing their own names called by children's voices, very faint, echoing, and always just out of view somehow. Some believe the children are harmless, while others think, they're trying to pull people into the river to join them. Ghost hunters who have investigated the area report very odd EMF readings, unexplained splashing sounds, and sun and cold spots, but they all agree on one thing: the air near the part of the river feels a lot heavier, like someone is watching you, like someone is waiting. La Llorona of the Organ Mountains. Now, she walks the trails barefoot, draped in white, her long black hair hiding her face. You hear her before you see her, crying softly and whispering, "Now, ¿dónde están mis hijos?" which is her saying, "Where are my children?" La Llorona, the weeping woman. Her story is told across Latin America, but in New Mexico, especially in the jagged shadows of the Organ Mountains, her legend feels terrifyingly real. One hiker said he was exploring the Aguirre Springs Trail alone just before dusk when he heard a woman sobbing behind him. He actually turned around, no one was there, the crying grew louder and louder, he started running, but the sound stayed right behind him until it suddenly just stopped. When he got to his car, the windows were fogged from the inside and his back seat was soaking wet. Another group of campers said they saw a woman in white drifting along the edge of their campsite late one night. Now, she was hovering a few inches off the ground. One of them tried to approach her, thinking maybe she needed help, but she turned to look at him and her face was bloated and blue, her mouth wide open in a very unnatural scream. The man literally collapsed. When he woke up, his boots were filled to the top with water. It hadn't rained there in days. Now, some say La Llorona is the spirit of a woman who did something terrible in a fit of rage and was cursed to wander forever in search of her missing children. Now, others believe she's more than a ghost, that she's more like a warning, a punishment, or a trap for the lost and lonely. And in the stillness of the desert, where sound travels for miles and shadows stretch like claws, her presence feels like more than just a story. Now, whether you believe in her or not, one thing is certain: the Organ Mountains are beautiful during the day, but when the sun sets and the trails go quiet, no one hikes there alone. So next time you find yourself in New Mexico, keep your eyes open and your instincts very sharp, because in a land where, the deceased never rest and the past kind of just goes into the present, legends don't stay legends for long. They come knocking. They stand in the road, they cry by the water, they follow you home.
During the height of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, 10 years removed from MKUltra and the illegal experiments performed by the CIA in that project, a new game showed up at arcades over in Portland, Oregon. The game had a plain black cabinet and featured a series of puzzles in different colors and geometric shapes. It didn't really have a name, but it was periodically serviced by different pairs of men in black suits. The game was pretty addictive, and those who played it afterwards tended to have a lot of amnesia. Stories say that at least 2 folks disappeared after playing it, and there's been a lot of other folks that came forward claiming to have been abducted by men in suits after playing. This game, which came to be called Polybius by those who knew of it, borrowing the name of the Greek historian famous for relying on first-hand accounts, disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. Take for instance Bobby Feldstein, who claims he was abducted one afternoon after playing the game at Coin Kingdom and experienced a lot of mind-altering side effects. Allegedly, he was led through a series of underground tunnels similar to the tunnels of Portland's Shanghai lore, and was found the next day more than 60 miles from his house in the middle of the forest. There was another boy with him apparently, one who rescued him, and there's been many other stories like his. But nowadays, Feldstein gives walking tours around Portland that attempt to authenticate his experience by returning to the former basement of Coin Kingdom. He claims the ordeal of the abduction ruined his life, telling a lot of folks, "Doing a tour is a way to exercise my demons on a daily basis. this. So nowadays, there's a lot of questions around how is this allowed to happen, and will it ever happen again? Ever hear about the toxic lady? Gloria Ramirez was an ordinary woman living in Riverside, California with a couple of descendants and a husband. A lot of her friends were like, yeah, she's friendly, she's a jokester, everybody loves her. But this all changed on February 19th of 1994 when Gloria was rushed to General Hospital in Riverside. That night, Gloria was battling a very rapid heartbeat and a drop in pressure. She could hardly breathe, and she also was answering questions in the form of incoherent sentences. Now, to make all of this even more unusual, she was just 31, but she had late-stage cervical cancer and was deteriorating pretty quickly when she got to the ER and passed less than an hour later. But here's the thing, she had a bit of a weird effect on the hospital staff. A lot of folks who treated her suffered from odd symptoms. We're talking fainting, shortness of breath, even temporary paralysis. 5 workers required hospitalization, at least one of whom remained in intensive care for 2 weeks after. So the medical staff, they took care of her. They gave her diazepam, lorazepam, everything to sedate her. And when it became clear that Ramirez was responding poorly to treatment, folks tried to defibrillate her. Everything that you're supposed to do. But then they noticed like an oily substance covering her body. Other folks noted a fruity garlic-like odor that they thought was coming from her mouth. So like I mentioned before, the poor thing passed away, and a team wearing hazmat suits performed her autopsy. But they couldn't explain why everybody else had fallen ill. A lot of folks were like, okay, it's mass hysteria. Until the coroner's office found that Ramirez had been trying to treat herself with dimethyl sulfone cream. When exposed to oxygen, this creates a vapor that affects people like poison gas. COINTELPRO, which is in a way a short form for counterintelligence program, was a series of covert and illegal projects conducted between 1956 and 1971 by the FBI that were aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting American political organizations that the FBI perceived as subversive. So groups and individuals targeted by the FBI included feminist organizations, the Communist Party, anti-Vietnam War organizers, activists in the civil rights and Black Power movements, folks like Martin Luther King Jr., the Nation of Islam, the Black Panther Party, environmentalist and animal rights organizations, independence movements including Puerto Rican independence groups such as the Young Lords and the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, and more. Although the program primarily focused on organizations that were part of the broader New Left, they also targeted white supremacist groups such as the National States Rights Party and a more popular group that you'd normally list off by their initials, but we shouldn't say that, the white guys in the pointy white outfits. You know what I mean. The FBI has used covert operations against domestic political groups since its inception. However, covert operations under the official COINTELPRO label took place between 1956 to 71. However, the official chronology of the program is kind of a subject of debate. According to a Senate investigation, if this had been a short-lived abomination, the thorny problems of motivation, techniques, and control presented might be safely relegated to history. But seeing as this organization existed for years on a quiet basis before the formal programs were instituted, and more significantly, these types of activities might actually continue to today under the rubric of investigation. A lot of the tactics used are alleged to have seen continued use, including discrediting targets through psychological warfare, smearing individuals and groups using forged documents, and by planting false reports in the media, harassment, wrongful imprisonment, illegal violence, and, well, taking them out. According to a Senate report, the FBI's motivation was protecting national security, preventing violence, maintaining the existing social and political order. FBI Director Hoover at the time issued directives governing this whole organization, ordering FBI agents to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of these movements and especially their leaders. Under Hoover, the official in charge of all of this was Assistant Director William C. Sullivan. Now, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy personally authorized a lot of these programs, giving written approval for limited wiretapping of Martin Luther King's phones on a trial basis for a month or so. Hoover extended the clearance so his men were unshackled to look for evidence in any areas of King's life that they deemed worthy. Whew, here's another historical doozy, and that's the start of the Tuskegee syphilis study in 1932. So black men in Alabama volunteered to undergo special treatment for bad human redness. They had seen signs in their neighborhood claiming that the government and the county health department would treat them, but what they didn't know was that they were actually signing up to be part of a study of untreated syphilis amongst black men. The purpose of the study was to observe the effects of the disease when untreated, though by the end of the study, medical advancements meant it was entirely treatable. Now, these men were not informed of the nature of the experiment, and more than 100 died as a result. There were 399 men who were diagnosed with syphilis and made to believe they would receive treatment for any symptoms of their bad fluids. Doctors in the area were told not to treat those in the study, just examine them, observe them. These men were initially told that the experiment was only going to be like 6 months, but it was extended to 40 years. After funding for the treatment was lost, the study was continued without informing the men that they would never be treated. None of the infected men were ever treated with penicillin, despite the fact that by like 1947, the antibiotic was widely available and was the standard treatment for syphilis. The study continued under numerous public health service supervisors until 1972, when a leak to the press resulted in its termination on November 16th of that year. Its revelation led to the 1979 Belmont Report and to the establishment of the Office for Human Research Protections, and federal laws and regulations requiring institutional review boards for the protection of human subjects in studies. Now that whole office manages this responsibility within the United States Department of Health and Human Services. It wasn't until May 16th of 1997 when President at the time, Bill Clinton, formally apologized on behalf of the United States to the victims of the study, calling it shameful, racist, and so forth. And in our final legend for today, did you know that there's actual alien debris buried in the desert of New Mexico? The Atari video game E.T. the Extraterrestrial failed so miserably that the company buried unsold cartridges in a desert landfill. Wait, well, what do you think I meant? Real aliens in New Mexico? We would have opened today with this if I was talking about bodies, folks. So this whole burial was a mass burial of a lot of unsold video game cartridges, consoles, and computers in a landfill site, and this was all done by Atari in 1983. Since the burial was first reported, there were a lot of doubts as to, like, really? Did somebody actually bury a bunch of video games in the desert? And for a while, and for a very long while, it was just an urban legend. This was like a cultural icon and a reminder of the video game crash of 1983. It was the end result of a disastrous fiscal year which saw Atari being sold off by its parent company, Warner Communications. And though it was believed that millions of copies of this game were buried, officials later verified that it was like around 700,000. And it was various games, but E.T. was one of them. Well, in 2014, Fuel Industries, Microsoft, and others worked with the New Mexico government to excavate the site as part of a documentary, Atari Game Over. And on April 26 of 2014, well, the excavation revealed a lot of discarded games and hardware. Now, it wasn't everything that was found. About like 1,300 cartridges were recovered, with a portion given for curation to museums, and then the rest auctioned to raise money for a museum to commemorate the burial. And the documentary, which features all of this, came out in November of that year. Number 5. Red Rooms. I'm just gonna start this off by getting the obvious out of the way. This has nothing to do with the 50 Shades trilogy, so don't bother asking about that icky series that barely knows the truth about anything schmexy. Among the many illicit activities that take place on the dark web, one of the most disturbing is the existence of red rooms. So these rooms have gained a lot of attention and infamy, with many rumors and myths circulating about their existence and operation. While some people believe that red rooms are nothing more than urban legends, others claim to have witnessed them firsthand. So in fact, on Reddit, 4chan, and Hidden Wiki, a kind of, Cliff Notes for dark web beginners, you can find people trading second and third and fourth hand accounts of red rooms that have opened and closed. The concept of red rooms first apparently appeared on the dark web sometime in the early 2010s, and their name derives from the color of the room where the supposed acts take place. The term red room gained popularity after a Japanese animation featured a pop-up ad asking, "Do you like the red room?" And if users attempted to close the ad, a full-sized window would open with the names of individuals who had supposedly accessed the red room before and were found dead. The idea is that viewers pay to watch a live stream of a person being tormented and eventually killed, and they can even interact with the tormentor and other viewers through chat or messaging functions. Payments for these services are made in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to ensure, anonymity. Despite the attention that red rooms have received, it's kind of challenging to determine whether they actually exist or not. But here's the thing, accessing them is not as difficult as one might expect. A simple Google search for redroom.onion, that link can yield results for these supposedly hidden pages. In addition, the technical limitations of the dark web make it almost impossible to stream live video, and payment analyses suggest that there are very few people actually paying for these services. Some people claim to have accessed them and seen the gruesome acts taking place, while others insist that they are nothing more than hoaxes designed to scare people. There have been no verified cases of people being killed in real time on the dark web, and many experts believe that the concept of red rooms is more of a fantasy than a reality. One reason why it's so challenging to verify the existence of these red rooms is because the dark web is notoriously difficult to navigate and monitor. It's impossible to search for specific websites on the dark web using traditional search engines like Google or Bing, and accessing dark web sites requires specialized software like Tor or I2P. Furthermore, many dark websites use encryption and other security measures to protect their users' identities and activities, making it pretty challenging to track or trace them. However, there have been some instances where law enforcement agencies have claimed to have shut down red rooms or arrested their operators. In 2015, the FBI arrested a man named Peter Scully in the Philippines who was accused of running a red room called Daisy's Destruction. The site was said to feature videos of Scully harming young people, and it was allegedly one of the most extreme examples of a red room ever discovered. Scully was eventually convinced of multiple crimes, including, young people sexual harm, human selling, and killing. Internet users continue to seek out the elusive and horrifying red rooms on sites like Reddit and 4chan, despite many claims that, it's nothing more than an urban legend. But let me know your take in the comments. Honestly, I believe they're out there, but I've also watched way too many crime shows for my own good. Number 4. What's for sale? I have wandered many an oddities market in my time, and heck, I've even performed an act at one that would make most people flinch. I've seen folks selling real and fake bones, demonic dolls, niche, schmexy fine leather goods, vintage clothes, tarot readings, banned books, World War II memorabilia, and oddities I can't even begin to describe. And heck, that's just the stuff like I can remember off the top of my head. So, what does the dark web have that I can't find in a niche marketplace? Oh, the no-no pills and powders. Sadly, I don't think I'm allowed to say the D word on here, so pardon me if things take a turn for the Looney Tunes way of speaking for safety's sake. I found plenty of tales on the interwebs about the crafty ways folks have been mailed their purchases. User OyRaves on Reddit is adamant that while he personally never received anything from any deep web affiliated sales folk, he did live with a roommate who would constantly receive the strangest brochures. At first, they received stuff for like cruise lines, which he wrote off as junk mail, but they came so frequently and started getting stranger, making him suspicious. For folks like me who might be wondering how pamphlets can get strange, apparently the mail ranged from, Christian Mingle brochures to petting zoo brochures, pretty much, any kind of pamphlet for any and all services one could think of. At the time, our narrator kind of felt like someone was gaslighting him, but he never said anything, and the brochures would disappear as quickly as they came, so he didn't really have time to stress it. That is until one fateful day when he walked into his apartment and his roommate was delicately cutting into a brochure to mull out a small baggie of powder. All I'm gonna say is that it definitely wasn't flour or icing sugar. Now, one time our narrator almost threw out a regular sized business envelope since after he opened it up, it looked similar to regular silly junk mail, until he noticed that the envelope had a hidden flap on the inside where there was, no things. Other transportation or delivery methods known to the dark webs include using a comic book that's still in the plastic ceiling, but the entire back page directly inside the cover was a sheet of acid, or a CD in a case, once again, with the plastic sealed, and it looked totally ordinary until you peeled back the case artwork. In terms of how some folks get away with powders, pills, and other stuff, apparently the trick is to use collectible Pez dispensers already filled with pills that look like, yep, they've never been opened. Funny story actually about white powder. One time I was doing a virtual script reading of the incredible movie Ready or Not, and had to mime using powder of my own, and I actually wound up inhaling way too much icing sugar up my nose, and oh my god, did it ever burn. Thankfully, I was off screen after it for a while, so I was able to recover in private, but it will be a permanent memory for the rest of my life. Number 3, hire a hitman. Alrighty, so this is where things get a little more into the legend part of today's video. One of the greatest myths about the dark web is that you can hire an assassin, with some folks saying that that kind of service costs as little as, $5 grand. Just a couple of months of rent. We all have that kind of money lying around, right? In this economy? Here's the thing, officially speaking, technically no dark web search records were ever found of an actual hit attempt or assassin operating there. Now, I'm not saying it's never happened, since I don't exactly have the time or expertise to go deep diving for a week, to try to find a legitimate person selling those types of services, but what was found by experts? So a network of dark web websites and individuals who accepted Bitcoin in exchange for absolutely nothing at all. I get using Bitcoin for secrecy and all, but trust me when I say you'll never catch me using it as a form of payment. If I ever start talking about cryptocurrency on social media, assume I've been hacked or kidnapped. Scammers out there are relying on the veil of mystery that the dark web has provided, whereas in reality, more injuries and killings happen through Craigslist and similar websites that are widely available on the surface web. It took me a moment to research that one, but yep, people have actually hired hitmen off of Craigslist for crimes. Granted, it never seems to end like they want it, so I wouldn't really recommend it. Also, leaving a digital trail is always a mistake if you want to do something naughty. No, I'm not speaking from experience, just common sense. Number 2, Silk Road. Silk Road was an online black market and the first modern darknet market that was launched back in 2011 by its American founder, Ross Ulbricht, under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. Hey look, I love a good reference to The Princess Bride, so that got me. The name Silk Road comes from a historical network of trade routes that were started during the Han Dynasty between Europe, India, China, and many other countries on the Afro-Eurasian landmass. 2 other individuals were also closely involved in the site's growth and success, known as Variety Jones and Smedley. In June of 2011, Gawker published an article about the site, which led to an increase in notoriety and website traffic. As part of the dark web, Silk Road operated as a hidden service on the Tor network, allowing users to buy and sell products and services between each other anonymously. To give you an idea of just how widespread it was, a former FBI special agent called it the Amazon of illicit substance sites. According to reliable sources, on Silk Road, you could buy no-no substances, illegal services, like hacking into private accounts, pirated content, fake passports, and more. All transactions were conducted with Bitcoin, which, I guess it does help with protecting user identities, but yeesh. The website was known for its illegal substance marketplace, among other illegal and legal product listings. Between February of 2011 and July of 2013, the site facilitated sales amounting to around 9 million bitcoins. In May of 2013, Silk Road was taken down for a short period of time by a sustained DDoS attack. On June 23rd of 2013, it was first reported that the DEA seized 11.02 bitcoins, then worth a total of $814, which the media suspected was a result of a Silk Road honeypot sting. The FBI has claimed that the real IP address of the Silk Road server was found via data leaked directly from the site's CAPTCHA and was located in Iceland. IT security experts have doubted the FBI's claims because technical evidence suggests that no misconfiguration that could cause a specific leak was present at the time, but in October of 2013, the FBI shut down Silk Road and arrested Ross. Silk Road 2.0 came online the next month, run by former site administrators, but was shut down the following year as a part of Operation Onimus. Number 1. Mariana's Web. Already, not to be confused with Matt Webb, the fantastic guitarist from Mariana's Trench, one of my favorite bands, because goodness knows that could be an easy mistake. The legend of Mariana's Web appears to get its name from the deepest part of the ocean though, Mariana's Trench. It's apparently the deepest part of the dark web, a forbidden place of mysterious evil. Maybe. Depending on where you get your Mariana's Web myths, it's where you'll find the darkest secrets humanity has in its history. The secret location of Atlantis and the Vatican secret archives, or a database of archives belonging to the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth. Now, if any of those titles sound familiar, I would recommend checking out some of the other content we put out here, since that's the type of stuff I like to talk about. But here's the thing. Mariana's Web is the definition of spooky BS, especially because it's technically impossible. It's supposedly only accessible through quantum computers, which really only exist in science fiction. This is once again where the legend part of today's title comes into play. But let me know in the comments if you think it exists, since honestly I wish it would. It would make my life a heck of a lot easier if I could hack into the Vatican archives and get the answers we all deserve.
Number 5. Slender Man. One of the more recent and yet prevalent urban legends is that of Marble Hornets' elongated Slender Man. The enigmatic figure is depicted as a tall, gangly, thin entity dressed in a suit and tie with fractally ever-expanding limbs and a blank, featureless humanoid head. Slender Man first reared that featureless head in internet forums and creepypasta stories, but gained incredible popularity and took a life beyond the internet. The legend of Slender Man states that it lurks in the shadows, often in backwoods and rural areas, and preys upon unsuspecting people. He's said to have an array of supernatural abilities, manipulating people's minds, controlling their actions subconsciously, can teleport, appear, and disappear at will. Slender Man is synonymous with strange disappearances, leaving behind trails of unsettling clues. Slender Man is a genuine phenomenon, transcending the digital realm and seeping into our real-life consciousness and absorbing up our thoughts. I think it's fascinating that in real time we got to watch this thing that started as an internet project turn into a genuine urban legend that will probably be told and retold for future generations. I feel like that's incredible. You see Slender Man in movies, you've seen Slender Man in tons of video games, you've probably seen all kinds of fan art, cosplay, little merchandise. Slender Man has a fandom rivaling most influencers, and is probably one of the most popular cryptids in the world, and also one of the most infamous. Because there is a very dark turn to Slender Man. When in 2014, 2 girls in Wisconsin carried out an attack on their classmate to please the entity, saying that they had been influenced by him, blending the lines between fiction and reality a bit too uncomfortably for most people's takes. A stark reminder to not take anything you hear on the internet too seriously. And if you're looking for way more scary stories of cryptids and urban legends, well, you don't need to go anywhere else on YouTube because you're in the perfect place for it. We've got a video or two on just about anything freaky you can think of. Hit that subscribe button, click that little bell so you don't miss a scream, but would you kindly do that at the end of this video? Because I got 4 more urban legends I am just itching to tell you all about. Number 4. The Gray Man. Coming up next on our list, we're going to take a quick trip to Europe as we head up to Scotland as we talk about the Gray Man. Up in the mist-shrouded peaks of the Cairngorms, they say there's a spirit out there called the Gray Man, watching over the harsh and treacherous terrain. This spectral entity lurks amidst the craggy slopes and swirling mists, described as a towering figure with an indistinct form. His appearance is shrouded in gray mist that seems to blend with the surrounding landscape, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly glow, looking just a bit like my black cat walking in the darkness getting caught by a flashlight. Some say the gray man is made up of the mist itself, precipitation given form in the shape of a being mistaken as a man. Many mountaineers and hikers who've braved the slopes of Ben Macdui have reported scary happenings that could be proof of the gray man's presence there. Eerily echoing footsteps, an overwhelming sense of dread taking over the pit of your stomach, and some bold expeditioners even claim that they've seen a glimpse of a towering gray humanoid silhouette watching them as they walk over the mountain. The legends warn you that those who are unfortunate enough to cross paths with the gray man will bring unimaginable malfeasance to you and your kin. Should you encounter him, you become disoriented, losing your way to the treacherous slopes or being driven to unspeakable madness from the supernatural powers that he has. Above all else though, what is the gray man? Where did the legend come from? Is it a malevolent spirit haunting those who cross into its territory? A guardian protecting the mountains? Whatever it might be, just be cautious walking through Ben Macdui. And if we have any Scottish viewers who have a bit of insight into the gray man, I found this legend absolutely fascinating and I would love any information you could share with us. Number 3. Mokolo Mabembe. Up next on our strange list of urban legends from across the world is going to be that of the cryptid Mokolo Mabembe. A cryptid that was totally new to me until this video, so I hope you are finding out about it too at the same time. There are very few things that make me half as happy as finding out about a new cryptid or a new urban legend that I haven't heard about before, because I read a lot of scary stuff every single day. The Mokolo Mabembe is a creature that is said to inhabit the remote regions of the Congo and is said to resemble a large, semi-aquatic creature sort of looking like a sauropod dinosaur. That's long neck if you're a Land Before Time fan. One of the really long ones. You probably heard it called as a brontosaurus. It's actually an apatosaurus, not to be too paleontology nerdy on the channel, but you know, it's important to get that out there. It looks like any other number of long-necked sauropods is what I'm trying to get across. Looks like a big dinosaur. Luckily, the creature is believed to be herbivorous, feeding on plants and aquatic vegetation. Now, according to local legends, the Mokolo Mabembe is said to inhabit the vast network of rivers, swamps, and dense forests of the Congo. Now, this thing's said to be secretive. Like most cryptids out there, there's very few camera-friendly cryptids, and it rarely reveals itself to humans. However, unlike many stories of cryptids or urban legends on this list or not, the Mokolo Mabembe is not hostile. It's not eating people, it's not attacking people. If you find yourself encountering the Mokolo Mabembe, it's said that you are blessed with good luck and spiritual protection. I mean, obviously you get to meet a dinosaur. That's like the coolest thing ever. Now, in the past, there have been official expeditions hunting for the creature, but it's hard to nail down due to the dense and inhospitable nature of the Congo. Now, much like Top 5 Scary's favorite, the Megalodon, or the Loch Ness Monster, the Mokolo Mabembe is said to be a long since extinct creature that somehow persisted onwards, or a new species that's eluded classification by science. So what is it? Is it really out there? I hope I can see it someday and be blessed with a bit of spiritual protection from my favorite long neck. Number 2, Akamanto. Up next at our number 2 spot, and it's a very fitting spot at number 2, and you'll see why in a minute, is Akamanto, also known as the Red Cloak. It manifests as a masked Japanese spirit and may very well be one of the most evil and downright strange creatures of folklore and urban myth you will ever hear about, I promise. The creature is a humanoid spirit with a long, flowing red cloak that traditionally has a mask that covers its features. It carries a blade or sometimes a scythe of some kind. Now, there's tons of little local variants in how the Akamanto operates, but there are elements that remain consistent across all tales. First and foremost, the Akamanto's modus operandus. The Akamanto preys on you during your most vulnerable moments. This would-be spiritual assassin comes to slay kings on the porcelain throne. It knocks on the smallest room in the house. This demon comes for you while you're on the toilet, if I can be so blue for a moment. That's why it's the number 2 spot. There you go. Little 3rd grade humor for you. Speaking of blue, that leads into the deadly game you're forced to play. The Akamanto then offers you a sinister choice. It asks the occupant a question, choosing between either red toilet paper or blue toilet paper. It's kind of like that guy from Squid Games offering you the paper. Actually, this is a little fun top 5 scary trivia for you. This cryptid is actually what literally inspired that scene in Squid Game. Now, it's a trick question. Neither of these toilet papers that this ghastly spirit has for you are anything like the Royale kittens, okay? The red paper means you will find yourself cut up, leaving behind quite a mess of red. The blue option means you'll be gasping for air, which is clean but slow and painful. This is so funny, but the only way to escape the Akamanto is to tell him that you've got enough toilet paper yourself. And thanks for asking, but you're good. Really, you just have to ignore him, reject his offer, or flush quick and hightail it out of there. You don't play smart with him, you don't ask for purple paper or sandpaper or any wise guy answers, as that's said to lead to the Akamanto dragging you into the underworld, just as long as he doesn't flush you. That's amazing. I love so much that this cryptid, you don't have to do any complicated ritual. You don't have to have some special weapon to fight him. You just have to tell him, no thanks. That's good advice. At number 1, La Llorona. Now, last time you guys made fun of my pronunciation for this, and I would like to inform you that I'm trying to do it better, but I'm almost certainly still doing it wrong. La Llorona, also known as the Weeping Woman, is a haunting legend deeply rooted in Latin American folklore. Perhaps you've heard her story before, on this channel even. She's rather infamous, told and retold, appearing in countless campfire stories, TV, movies. Her tale has captivated generations, scaring us and fascinating us. It's a cautionary tale, warning us of the consequences of disobedience and the dangers of the night. According to the legends, La Llorona was a beautiful woman named Maria who lived in a rural village. She fell in love with a wealthy nobleman and had a family with him. However, the nobleman abandoned her for a younger woman, shattering Maria's heart. Oh, Maria, baby. Nobleman will do that to you. Consumed by grief and anger, Maria drowned her family, except for her husband, in a fit of madness, realizing too late the enormity of her actions. Overwhelmed by guilt and remorse for what she had done, she cast herself into the water and took her own life. But her spirit was denied afterlife, and she was condemned to wander the earth for eternity. She's often described as a spectral figure dressed all in white, her face obscured by either a veil of sorrow or her long, black, wet-soaked hair covering over it. She's said to haunt rivers, lakes, other bodies of water, weeping inconsolably as she searches for her lost family she'll never find. Her cries are bone-chilling, a mournful wail that echoes through the night, and whatever you do, if you hear it, you need to ignore it. You need to avoid it. Do not go bothering her. Legend has it that encountering her is basically a guarantee of misfortune. It's said that she looks out for younger people, mistakes them for her own, and drags them away. Many claim to have seen her and heard her cries in the darkness, but if they try to approach, she vanishes.
Number 5 on this list is Okeku. I was talking the other day on this channel about some super creepy dolls and how Annabelle would be high up on the list. Well, a list on creepy dolls would also need to have Okeku. Gaijin Post says, the story goes that in 1918 in Hokkaido, Ikichi Suzuki purchased for his young sister, Kikoko, a traditional Japanese Okopa doll. Sadly, Kikoku died from a cold and the family kept the doll in a shrine to their daughter and named it Okiku. However, the family noticed something odd about the doll. Over time, its hair was getting longer. The family believed the doll possessed with the restless spirit of their deceased daughter and so looked after it until entrusting it in the care of Manaji Temple. There, the doll remains slowly growing human hair. You can visit Okiku, but photography isn't allowed. Today, even after a few trims from the temple's priests, the doll's hair has grown past its knees. It's also supposedly upped its terror. The priests claim to have nightmares of Okiku, and visitors say the doll's mouth is slowly opening and sprouting baby teeth. I think the creepiest thing about this for me is the baby teeth that this thing is reportedly growing. Like, how on earth is that even possible? Actually, I'll answer that for you. It isn't. This completely defies all logic and goes against everything that we understand about life and growth. It sounds to me like this thing is slowly but surely coming alive and becoming a hybrid between a human being and a doll. I also really don't like the idea that the priests who are around this thing have nightmares about it. For all we know, these nightmares aren't even dreams at all, but they're real. Maybe this thing gets up in the night, moves around, and they just think that they're having a nightmare, but really it's real life. As far as I'm concerned, this doll needs to be destroyed as soon as possible. Everything about it screams unnatural and creepy, and I doubt that anyone would be surprised if, in a few years, this thing decided to become alive and start pulling a Chucky and just going on a total killing spree. Number 4 on this list is Akamanto. If you think the trip to the bathroom after Taco Bell is bad, then clearly you've never had to deal with Akamanto. Gajinpo says, Akamanto meets victims when they're most vulnerable. On the toilet. He wears a white mask and a long red cape. There are many variations to the legend. He holds red and blue toilet paper in some stories, but he's only in his cape in others. However, he always asks the victim to choose a color, red or blue. It doesn't matter what you answer because Akamanto kills you regardless. Choosing red rewards you with a stabbing, spilling your blood all over the stall. If you answer blue, Akamanto either suffocates you or sucks out your blood, leaving you blue-faced and dead on the floor. So your best bet is to either ignore the fiend or run away. Akamanto's origins are a mystery but are likely inspired by the Japanese school toilets where the grisly murders occur. In Japan, every English teacher can attest to being in an eerily large yet empty school with a bathroom furthest away from the others, old and unkept. Moreover, who wants to answer questions while trying to take a number 2? This is honestly the worst demon I think I've ever heard of, guys. Like literally, screw you, Akamanto. It's been a long, tiring day so far. I'm exhausted. I just need to take a tiny break to go and take a poo, and yet here you are trying to kill me. Taking a dump is supposed to be relaxing, freeing experience. For a few minutes, I get to be transported away from where I am and just chill. Ruining that tiny time period that we get in the day to ourselves is pretty freaking lousy. Most of the time, I recommend running away from demons or outsmarting them. But I don't know, guys. I think with this dude, I'd be so pissed off that my poo's getting interrupted, I might just have to throw hands. If I died defending toilet time, then you know what? At least I know I died valiantly. Number 3 on this list is Maruka Castle. Maruka Castle is a beautiful Japanese castle. Problem is that the weather is not nearly as nice. In fact, it's almost always raining at this castle. Rarely a few hours ever go by without rain coming down a little bit at this place. Well, believe it or not, this isn't just some fluke of nature. There's an urban legend here. To understand what this urban legend is, you must first understand what Hitobashira is. Hitobashira was a kind of human sacrifice in Japan where lords would brick people up in their homes or their castles, and the person would slowly die locked away in this tiny bricked up chamber. The thinking was that this would appease the gods and that this would protect the building that this person was sacrificed in. Well, this castle was host to one of the most famous Hitobashira stories ever. There was one wall in this castle that just could not seem to stay up. It kept being reinforced, but it never mattered. It would always find a way to crumble. Well, only logical thing to do at this point is to brick a human being up in it and hope that that works. A one-eyed peasant woman named Oshizu was chosen for this sacrifice. She was okay with doing it, but requested that the lords make her 2 sons into samurai after her death. They happily agreed to this and proceeded to brick her up and sacrifice her to the gods. They never kept the promise though when the 2 boys didn't become samurai. Now it rains constantly because Oshizu is always crying for her sons. At springtime, the river overflows and it's really detrimental for the locals. So much so that they even built a tomb in her honor, but it didn't matter though, her tears continue to rain down. Number 2 on this list is the Howling Inunaki Tunnel. So this is a weird one for sure. The tunnel is only one part of the legend because on the other side of the tunnel is a mysterious village that hardly anyone has ever been able to see. Gajinpo says, supposedly located deep in the Inunaki countryside of Kyushu's Fukaku Prefecture, this abandoned village is said to only be accessible through Inunaki Tunnel. The stories say that all who enter the village are doomed to a violent death. These myths and tales also seem to mention that there's some sort of official sign stating the Japanese constitution is not in effect past here, meaning that all who enter are on their own to face the real or supernatural horrors that await. The tales, however, were likely inspired by a brutal murder that actually took place in Inunaki Tunnel. The tunnel, being remote and rarely used by traffic, was a popular spot for gangs. One afternoon in December 1988, a group of teens kidnapped, robbed, and tortured a 20-year-old boy before burning the young man alive deep within the tunnel. Today, Inunaki Tunnel, or Howling Dog Tunnel in Japanese is considered one of the most haunted places in Japan. Large concrete bricks block its entrance. No one knows if the village beyond this tunnel is real or not, and it's kind of impossible to ever find out because if you ever actually got there, then you just die immediately. Even if this place is real though, clearly this tunnel has seen its fair share of death over the years with the story of the boy. The government has literally just written it off completely and doesn't even seem to care what goes on here. This is definitely a spot to avoid in Japan. The consequences could be dire if you go here. Number 1 on this list is Kuchisake Onna. This is by far one of the most famous Japanese urban legends and certainly one of the scariest. Scoop Whoop says, considered to be the wife of a samurai warrior who slit open her mouth when he found out about her infidelity, Kuchisake Onna has an interesting urban legend surrounding her. She walks on the streets after sunset on foggy days with her face covered with a surgical mask approaching travelers. She then asks the travelers if they thought that she was pretty, and most would answer with a yes. Well, she'll then remove her mask, exposing her slit mouth. She'd then ask the traveler again if they thought that she was pretty. If they answered with a yes again, she produces a pair of scissors and slits their mouth open. If they say no, then she'll produce a scythe and then cut them in half. Apparently, the trick is to answer saying that she looked average, which would confuse her and she'd have to leave. I've never heard a story where telling somebody that they looked average ended well, but I guess that's what we have here, guys. The sightings have been very frequent around Japan, and it's kind of conventional knowledge now that if somebody ever approaches you asking this question, proceed with serious caution. Maybe just proceed with caution if anyone approaches you and says that though. Kind of a strange opener if you think about it.
Coming in at number 5, we've got a Nevadan escapade. This story comes from a self-proclaimed survivalist living in Nevada. They open up the tale with a bit of a disclaimer, saying that they never really believed in the paranormal before this happened. In fact, prior to experiencing this, they would have assumed that anything strange going on would likely be the result of government experiments and the like. There was absolutely no way they expected an experience like the one I'm about to summarize. So the survivalist had a couple weeks of vacation saved up and didn't want to let it roll over to the next year. Taking that time off, he didn't really know what to do with himself. After a day of doing nothing, he decided to go camping on his own, as none of his friends were able to take any time off. Away he went, packing some basic supplies and grabbing coffee and donuts on the way out. After setting up camp in the middle of nowhere, the survivalist decided to have a little vodka and do some target shooting. Following an encounter with a jackrabbit, he came across a freshly killed coyote. Seeing as hunting coyotes is relatively common practice in Nevada, he didn't think much of it, but he still saw the way the body was left as strange. Weird smell too. That evening, while scanning through some capped channels on his ham radio, the survivalist came across something odd. Knowing that there was military presence in the area, he wasn't too surprised to hear the sounds of gunfire coming through the speaker. However, these wargame sounds were followed up by what he described as nails on a chalkboard and a blood-curdling scream. Immediately after hearing these noises, the radio crapped out. Uh-oh. Reassuring himself that whatever happened there was hundreds of miles away, he went to bed. The next day, while puttering about, he wandered into a fenced-off military area, letting him know that whatever those noises were last night, they were probably closer than he assumed. Exploring this area more, he came across a cave that piqued his interest. Heading inside, he didn't notice anything odd at first, but soon became attuned to a very particular rotting smell. The same smell he noticed when coming across the oddly killed coyote. This tipped something off in his head and he got the hell out of there. At that point, the survivalist was terrified. Returning to his camp, he found that it had been raided. Everything was torn up, tossed about, and emptied, and nothing was missing though. While checking on his equipment, he noticed that all of these sounds in the area had stopped, dead quiet as night fell. And that's when he saw it. A humanoid creature standing off to the side, looking straight at him with dark voids for eyes. Hell, it even looked like it cracked a little smile. The survivalist tried to shoot it, but his bullets didn't seem to do anything but piss it off, making it scream in an ungodly fashion. Seeing that his weapon wasn't doing much, he booked it out of there and found a crevice to hide out in until sunrise. And when the sun rose, he got the hell out of there, ASAP. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Forest Ranger. Being a forest ranger must be fascinating, right? Out in the wilderness all day, every day, minimal human contact, keeping an eye on the local flora and fauna, occasionally taking part in rescues, maybe helping a lost hiker find their way, wearing a cool hat. What a life. Of course, it isn't all fun and games. There are plenty of harrowing situations one can find themselves in when deep in the forest. However, mythical monsters don't usually come up during job training, so you better watch out. Take this tale from a forest ranger somewhere in the States. While responding to a missing persons report, they found themselves in a tricky area of the hiking trail. At some point it splits, with one of the paths leading people deeper into the forest instead of back to the service area. Naturally, the ranger called for some backup, and about a half hour later his backup showed up. Ranger and backup head off into the woods, calling out for the missing person, but to no avail. And when they got to the split in the path, Mr. Backup disappeared too. Trying for a while to contact the missing backup on their walkie, the ranger got a little spooked. Then, when all hope seemed to be lost, he ran into someone matching the description of the original missing person. However, this individual didn't respond to anything the ranger said to them. The ranger took the person back to their truck and told them to wait in the back while he went to look for his backup again. At this point, his backup chimed in on the walkie, saying that he'd found the missing hiker at the bottom of a hill with a broken leg and would be returning with him soon, which didn't line up with what he had seen. The ranger went back to the truck and saw that it was empty, with the passenger door wide open and the cage inside bent out of shape. Apparently that kind of stuff had been happening for a while too. Folks hearing their neighbors calling out in the night when they knew their neighbors were on vacation, or perhaps hearing their dog barking outside when the dog was at the foot of their bed. Coming in at number 3, we've got a deep woods discovery. There's nothing quite like having your expectations subverted, yeah? I don't want to spoil too much of this story before I tell it, so here we go. I found this one in green text format, and it seems to be coming from a person living in a rural area. Every year, they find that hiking in the wooded area near their home is quite pleasant in the fall, so they head out to do just that. However, they seem to find some of the more overgrown areas unsettling. Makes sense, especially if you're far away from society at large. As they explore a little more, they notice something dive into the bushes, giving them a start. At that point, the hiker has had enough and decides to book it. There's something nearby though, and it seems to be following quite closely. Eventually, the hiker makes it to the end of the trail and realizes that they have to go back where they came from. After the experience they had, they're not looking forward to it. In the end, they do indeed buck up and head back to the top of the trail. When they get to the part where they saw something dive into the bushes, they realize that it wasn't a monster or anything sinister, but in fact a little girl. She calls out for help, but as the hiker gets closer, a strange feeling washes over him. It looks like the girl is hurt and can't walk on her own, but when the hiker gets close enough for the little girl to see him, she begins screaming bloody murder. Oh no. It's at this point that the hiker gives up all pretenses and eats the girl, taking her form. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Moose Man. Let's take a quick trip to Alberta, except instead of seeing the mountains or hockey, we'll go looking for shape-shifting terrors. Hooray! There were tales circulating around for a while about some sort of centaur with moose features instead of horse ones, although many claim these to be patently false. That's not going to stop me from talking about it as if it were real though. This thing lived by the river and never got too close to human settlements. However, it would often kill and mutilate game animals to make them unusable. In fact, it's also said to have been involved in the killing and maiming of many men as well. Beyond the moose-centaur comparison, there isn't much to be said about the way this creature looks. It's huge, as all moose tend to be, and walks around with flesh hanging from its antlers. Like many creatures in the same vein, it reeks of something otherworldly and tends to make hideous noises when encountered. Whether the moose look is its only avatar or one of many forms, we may never know. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Roadrunner. Meep meep indeed. While walking his dog at around 10 p.m, our storyteller came across a couple dead rabbits accompanied by a horrid stench. Assuming it was just a fox or something, he moved right along. Soon after, his dog started acting super weird though. It wouldn't move at all and seemed to be staring at something off in the distance, eyes wide. Then, the smell came back. This time he couldn't quite place where it was coming from, but he'd heard enough stories about bad smells and evil vibes in the woods to know to be careful. He took his dog and got off the path, hiding in some tall grass to the side. That's when he saw it. Something almost indescribable. Gray skin, rotten flesh, a horrible, emaciated horse's head, limbs that only seemed to half work. Made him want to run away at full speed immediately, but that was a bad call with it so close by. Sneaking seemed to be the better choice. The man and his dog started creeping away and got about 50 feet. The creature was out of sight now and the man thought he could start running. But apparently the Roadrunner knew exactly where he was trying to sneak away to and was immediately on his tail. Thankfully, the sneaking gave this man and his dog a bit of a head start and they were off to the races. As they ran from this awful beast, the man could hear it breathing. It sounded like an overexcited child, happy to be running in the woods in search of something good. Thankfully, getting back to the jagged gravel path proved to be a challenge for the Roadrunner. Whatever was wrong with its limbs made it difficult to traverse the rocky terrain, and eventually it gave up, screaming all the while. The man hasn't seen the creature again, but that's no guarantee that it's not around. Shapeshifting isn't uncommon with these kinds of things.
Number 5. La Laurie Mansion. This mansion is known as one of the most haunted places in the historic French Quarter in New Orleans. The tale originates in 1832 when Dr. Louis La Laurie and his wife Delphine moved into the home. Known as a popular socialite in town, as well as a grand party thrower, Delphine hid some very dark secrets in this elaborate home during a time when slavery was prevalent in the South. The 3-story mansion at 1140 Royal Street housed horrors and atrocities that only began to surface after police raided the home because a neighbor saw Delphine chase a young girl around her garden with a whip. She then chased the girl onto her roof, where the girl, jumped to her death. Thankfully, laws were in place in New Orleans during that time to punish her. However, somehow, through relatives, Delphine's slaves were returned to her. Delphine used to chain up her cook to the stove all day, only to unchain her for bed, and then would chain her back all day when she woke in the morning. It is said that a fire broke out in the home in 1834, supposedly by this cook who could no longer stand her fate, and when firefighters entered the damaged home, the rumors only became more true. Delphine had disappeared, never to be found again after an angry mob gathered. Gruesome tales have surfaced since this tragic event. For almost 200 years, there have been reports of paranormal activity coming from this house. It shouldn't surprise many that hauntings are attributed to the slaves that Madame La Laurie kept on the property. There's a room in the mansion where slaves were often kept, and reports of moaning coming from that room are very common. Phantom footsteps echo throughout the house with regularity, and many people who have stood near the house have reported feeling as if they were taken over by negative energy. In 1894, a tenant who lived at the mansion when it was being used as an apartment complex was brutally killed in his room. Folks found his belongings ransacked as if someone had gone through them, leading the police to originally assume that he was a victim of a robbery, even though nothing of value was found missing. An interesting account regarding this deals with the police interviewing neighbors about his disappearance, when one of his friends claimed that he was having problems with sprites in his house. This friend wrote it off as his imagination running wild, but claimed that the victim had told him that there was a demon in the house and wasn't going to rest until he had met his end. Okay, mark this down as a spooky place you don't want to spend a night in. Number 4. The Tomb of Marie Laveau. Known as the Voodoo Queen, Marie Laveau was born on September 10th of 1794. She was born a free woman of color in the French Quarter of New Orleans and was a dedicated practitioner of voodoo, a practice that she passed down to her daughter named Marie Laveau II. Following the reported death of her husband, Jacques Paris, she enters a domestic partnership with Christophe Dominique Duminy de Glapion, a nobleman of French descent, with whom she lived until his death in 1855, and together they had 7 children according to birth and baptismal records. Laveau was a known healer, herbalist, entrepreneur, along with being a prominent female religious leader and community activist. In her role as a voodoo practitioner, customers often appealed to the priestess for help with family disputes, health, finances, and more. Laveau performed her services in 3 main places: her home on St. Anne Street, within Go Square, and at Lake Pontchartrain. She was the 3rd female leader of voodoo in New Orleans, and passed away on June 15th of 1881 at the age of 79. Though even days after her death, many say they could still see her roaming the streets, and her grave today still resides in New Orleans at the St. Louis Cemetery. Locals say that if you place a rose on her grave at midnight on her birthday, that you can levitate above the historic gravesite. Number 3. Rougarou. The Rougarou legend has been spread for many generations, either directly from French settlers to Louisiana or via the French-Canadian immigrants centuries ago. Rougarou represents a variant pronunciation and spelling of the original French loup-garou, which is the version I heard about when I was younger at summer camp. According to Barry Jean Ancelette, an academic expert on Cajun folklore and professor at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette in America, the tale of Rougarou is a common legend across French Louisiana. Both words are used interchangeably in southern Louisiana. Some folks call the monster Rougarou, while others refer to it as the loup-garou. So just so I personally don't get confused today, I'll stick with Rougarou when referring to this legend. In the Cajun legends, the creature is said to prowl the swamps around Acadiana and Greater New Orleans, specifically the sugarcane fields and woodlands of the region. The Rougarou is most often described as a creature with a human body and the head of a wolf or a dog, similar to most werewolf legends. Often the storytelling has been used to inspire fear and obedience. One such example is stories that have been told by elders to persuade Cajun younglings to behave. According to another variation, the beast will hunt down and kill Catholics who do not follow the rules of Lent. This coincides with French Catholic loup-garou stories, according to which the method for turning into a werewolf is to break Lent 7 years in a row. For what it's worth, I've been ignoring Lent for much longer, and I'm not a werewolf. I'm closer to being part vampire, but not part wolf. Long story. A part of the legend says that the Rougarou is under the spell for 101 days, and after that time, the curse is transferred from person to person when the Rougarou draws another human's life source. During that day, the creature returns to human form, and although acting sickly, the human refrains from telling others of the situation for fear of being killed. Other stories range from the Rougarou as a rabbit to the Rougarou being derived from witchcraft. In the latter claim, only a witch can make a loup-garou, either by turning into a wolf herself or by cursing others with lycanthropy. Make of that what you will. Number 2. The Grinch. The Grinch is described to be an elaborate cross between the canid and reptilian chupacabras. New Orleans residents have so named the creature the Grinch after the old dirt road that leads to a dead end in the woods that it likes to frequent. But sightings and tales, unlike its cousins, seem to go back farther in Louisiana history than in other areas of the world, dating back to the Crescent City's early roots. This southern cryptid has been called the Vampire of Farbarelle-Marigny and Bywater area, dating back to the early 1800s. Vampire, eh? The Grinch is said to hide in the tall grass and exist off of the red fluids of goats and humans. It preys on those who park their cars on its namesake road at night. The most common description of the New Orleans Grinch is a goat-like being appearing to have leathery or scaly black-gray skin and sharp spines with long horns or quills running down its back. The creature stands approximately 3 to 4 feet high and are also said to seem more intelligent and have human-like skills, able to open doors, use tools similar to how a monkey or primate would. It is said to howl like a wolf, scream like a banshee, or bellow and screech like an ape when alarmed, as well as leave a strong stench. Many reports note that the eyes glow an unusual red, orange, or blue-green color, depending on who you ask. Some witnesses have reported seeing bat-like wings and a tail or long fur and goat-like markings in gray on a silky black coat. The Grinch has sharp teeth, long claws, and it is said that he would rip his victims open. Stories vary, but one suggests that voodoo priestess Marie Laveau castrated a devil baby and from what fell spreaded 2 creatures. The Grinch are said to have almost killed her with their fierce bites and punching, and the voodoo queen fainted from the attack. But when she awoke, the 2 were gone. All versions agree that it's a group of deformed half-human, half-monsters that evolved in the bayou over years of isolation. It's said that if you happen to be on the road and see an injured goat, you should not get out of your car, as the Grinch uses the creatures to lure unsuspecting victims out to drain them of their scarlet elixir. Recently, a Harvey, Louisiana lady said she saw one eating one of her neighbor's dogs. Sanitation workers tell of seeing them raid the garbage cans or chase the garbage trucks along the New Orleans East Hines Boulevard and Grunch Road area. The Grinch is said to haunt many areas in New Orleans and surrounding parishes, such as Lakeview, Metairie, Chalmette, Harvey, Tarrytown, Slidell, Covington, and Paradis. They are said to live in the darkest parts of the New Orleans City Park golf course and have been seen running in the tall grass and along the levees of Chalmette National Battlefield. In the Paradis, Luling, and Bouette, LA area, many say late at night you can see them running across Highway 90 looking for something or someone to eat. Lakeview residents nowadays tell of how they no longer leave their pets in the yard after Hurricane Katrina, as so many Grunch were displaced into the neighborhood. Specifically in Harvey, Louisiana, many people tell of seeing them knock over trash cans and chasing cats to consume from them. People at first thought they were rabbit or mangy hairless raccoons, but trust me, that's more of a Toronto problem. Number 1. The Honey Island Swamp Monster. So the Honey Island Swamp Monster, also known as the Louisiana Wookiee, is a humanoid cryptid that is reported to have been seen in and around, Honey Island Swamp, Louisiana since 1963. It was first reported when 2 hunters spotted this creature, prowling the swamps, and its tracks indicated that it had 3-toed webbed feet. They said it was standing over 7.5 feet tall and weighed somewhere between 400 to 500 pounds or more. It's also believed to be covered in a thick coat of matted gray or brown hair and swamp weed. Apparently its yellow eyes are seemingly reptilian, and the smell it emits has been called the stench of death. Now it is possible that a Bigfoot evolved webbed feet to, to better suit its swamp environment, which is a theory that I personally believe, but some folks are adamant that it's some sort of government experiment gone weird. Which, it's likely. Who knows what the government's hiding these days? The original 1963 spotting took place when Harlan Ford and his friend Billy Mills were searching for an abandoned cabin, spotted by Ford in a plane, deep in the Honey Island Swamp, giving this cryptid its name. The friends reached a clearing where they spotted the creature, who kept eye contact with them for only a moment before escaping into the underbrush. Describing the creature, Ford said that it was nothing like he'd ever seen before, ugly and sinister and looking like something out of a horror movie. In 1974, Ford and Mills returned to the area on a duck hunting trip. The two found several dead boars with their throats torn out along the way, and knowing that the boars were too far from the water to have been killed by alligators, they began to suspect the monster they had encountered, 9 years earlier as the culprit. This suspicion was confirmed when they noticed footprints, 3-toed and webbed, around one of the boars. Rather than have a second run-in with the swamp monster, the two decided to get the heck out of there, but returned later that night to make a cast of the footprints. All the power to them for doing that, but I know I would have been too scared. Another man named Ted Williams claimed to have seen the creature many times, positive that there were multiple swamp monsters. And that's not scary enough. One day, Ted took his boat out in the swamp to set, trout lines and was never seen again. This primitive creature has long been blamed for the death of livestock and the mysterious disappearances of younglings in adjacent areas. Popular lore in the region is that the Honey Island swamp monster might be the horrifying product of a union between a chimpanzee and an alligator. And in the darkly primordial swamplands that must look, pretty much the same now as they did thousands of years ago, the existence of almost any creature seems possible. One of the strangest legends, though, surrounding this monster revolves around a train wreck, which allegedly occurred near the Pearl River in the early part of the 20th century. According to this legend, the train was full of exotic animals from a traveling circus, which fled into the swamps after the train derailed. While most of the creatures would soon perish in the swampland, the legend goes on to claim that a troop of chimpanzees managed to survive, and even went as far as to interbreed with alligators.
Number 5. The Screaming Bridge. Now, our first Texan urban legend is a long-told story based on a real tragedy. The accident on Screaming Bridge. Geesh, if that is not a name. That sounds more like it belongs on Hogwarts campus than it does somewhere in Texas. Over 50 years ago, several students were carpooling home after their football team defeated their rivals in a major victory. The students were riding high, celebrating, and were definitely not concerned with driving safely. I mean, come on, they just won the big game. Who wouldn't be celebrating? The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was wide enough to accommodate maybe one car at a time, if that, and the students were hollering and hooting and not even remotely looking at the road, drowning out the outside world and focused on themselves and this beautiful moment in time, not worrying about their future, their surroundings, the car speeding towards them. Unfortunately, by the time anyone could realize what was happening, it was too late to stop it. The cars collided, erupting in a horrifying explosion, claiming the lives tragically of every single person involved in this crash. Now, this bridge can only be accessed by foot now. It was then given the name Screaming Bridge in honor of the horrible events that had happened up there. Now, local legends state that if you do journey up to Screaming Bridge and you stand looking right over at the river, you'll be able to see the apparitions of tombstones of all the victims. Goes a little further though. Visit up at midnight on the day of the crash, the anniversary. They say you're able to hear the screeching of the cars and the screaming of the victims, hence Screaming Bridge. Scary, scary stuff. I'm probably gonna take a little detour if I'm ever down in Arlington. I think I'm good. I'm sure there are plenty of non-haunted bridges for me to keep my feet on. And if you're looking for way more scary content, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. We've got urban legends from across the globe, horror movies, true tales, cryptids, ghosts, aliens, just about everything scary you could shake a stick at. So stay subscribed, but way more importantly, stay scared. And hey, stay watching this video, okay, before you check out the rest of the channel. We got way more cryptids and urban legends to go. Number 4, the Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is one of my absolute favorite cryptids out there. I love the variants in sightings and legends because sometimes, depending on who's telling the story, the Chupacabra is described as being like an alien, reptilian, like horrible little goblin guy that runs around on all fours and is from another planet and sucking all the goats. And then sometimes in some stories the Chupacabra is just like a weird looking dog. I love it. Not all cryptids need complicated lore. Sometimes they're just a weird looking dog. Now, legends of the Chupacabra stemmed initially from Puerto Rico. Most cryptozoologists believe with stories dating back to the 1970s. Livestock was found going missing all around this one small town, Mocha, and were initially assumed to be the work of some cult, but later reported to be thought to be the cause of an animal, as all the livestock found had bite marks and their bodies bled dry. Now, the name Chupacabra literally translates to goat sucker, which is so funny that when you learn that, it is impossible to ever unlearn that. Now, this creature is a widespread phenomenon reported across the Southwest and Mexico, but Texas, of all places, seems to be a real hotbed for the creature. One very determined author, Ben Radford, who's a researcher at the Center for Skeptical Inquiry, and he even penned a book appropriately titled Tracking the Chupacabra, says that Texas is a Chupacabra factory, one of the foremost places in the world associated with the beast. One of the more recent sightings and one of the more viral ones that was going around was a few years ago in Amarillo. A zoo's security camera captured weird footage of a creature standing on its back legs that looks a whole lot like a Chupacabra or Crash Bandicoot. You decide for yourself. Number 3, the Black-Eyed Children. Our next entry details the paranormal sighting of a cryptid called the Black-Eyed Children. Nailing down the first earliest sighting of Black-Eyed Children ever is difficult since there are some conflicting reports, but most people tend to agree that the first widely recognized instance of this was from a journalist in Texas in 1996 all the way down in Abilene. Brian Bethel was a journalist working at the time, and he said he stopped in a parking lot near a movie theater to write a check. He heard a knocking on the door of his car, and he looked up from his pen and paper and said, and I'm quoting him on this, he said he felt a soul-racking fear looking out at a boy and his younger brother. The boy told Bethel that he and his younger brother both wanted to catch a movie, but they didn't have any money. Bethel was uncomfortable with this, but dismissed it as just having the jitters. The two kids told him that, hey, we're just kids, nothing to be scared of, and that they didn't have any weapons, which is, you know, that's a totally normal thing that kids would say to you in a parking lot all the time to calm you down. Bethel told the boys that the movie they wanted to see was already playing and they wouldn't be able to make it in time. Since this was in 1996, we can only speculate on what they wanted to see, but I'm pretty sure it was the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic Jingle All the Way. Anyway, Bethel said when he broke eye contact with the young little weirdos, he found himself completely swallowed by his own fear. The boy's eyes then became completely black, obsidian as midnight on a moonless night. Bethel's story kickstarted a number of sightings of these black-eyed children across Texas and even showing up in other states. No one's got any idea just what they were or what they wanted really. Like, what are they? What are their goals? Were they even human or just creatures sort of masquerading as humans? And did they really just want to see a movie and maybe he should have just driven them down to the Cineplex? We may never get answers on that one. Number 2, the Candy Lady. Now our next story is a real sweet one. It details an old urban legend about a nightmarish figure named the Candy Lady. Does she know the Candy Man, do you reckon? I bet they would be a great fit for each other if anyone wants to set that blind date up. Anywho, the Candy Lady, despite the sweet nickname, was a ruthless criminal with little regard for her victims. Her real name was Clara Crane, but history remembers her as the Candy Lady since that's way scarier. Get ready for a humdinger of a ghost story. In 1895, she was accused of poisoning her husband by slipping him caramel candies that she had laced with something lethal. Now, a couple years before, this young couple had lost their child, causing Clara to become distraught. Clara blamed her husband for what had happened to the child, leading her to add a little extra sugar to his sweets. Oh, I'm making light of this. That's terrible. If she poisoned her husband, that's just terrible. I don't want to joke about that. Clara was deemed unfit for trial and was placed in the North Texas Lunatic Asylum, which, don't worry, thankfully received the much more pleasant name as Terrell State Hospital down the line. I can't believe that's ever what it was called before. Imagine getting sent to the North Texas Lunatic Asylum. Unfortunately, her stay at the North Texas Lunatic Asylum would not be the end of her legacy. I just wanted to say it again one more time. I'm sorry. Can you blame me? In 1903, people started going missing around the town Clara lived in. Bizarrely, relatives of the victims would report finding candies and candy wrappers around their home. Sometimes there would even be threatening little notes on these candies. Locals started speaking again of Clara Crane, the woman who infamously poisoned her husband with dark candies years back. Now here's where it gets bone-chilling. A nearby farmer found a bunch of teeth in his fields and then discovered the body of the town sheriff in his field without his choppers and forks in his eyes and candy in his pockets. Now, no one knows what truly became of Clara Crane. There's not really a lot of records for this thing, but she's become a great ghost story to locals who tell the tale of her luring people away with her sweet little treats and taking their teeth and eyes in return. Oh my god, that's giving me a toothache just talking about it. We have to move on from this one, otherwise I'm gonna have to book a dentist appointment soon. Okay, moving on. Number 1, the Donkey Lady. I saved the best for last. Our last entry is the bizarre legend of the Donkey Lady. Now there's a few variations on the origin of the Donkey Lady, but the stories always end up the same horrible way. And we'll get there in just a minute. But let's take it all the way back to the start, and to go back to the start we gotta go sometime in the mid 1800s. The story goes that there was a family that lived near Elm Creek, way down in San Antonio. They had a modest farm property, a husband, a wife, and their children. One day a $5 man from up north rode past their property and taunted the family for the donkey that they had. Not sure why you'd do that, he's clearly never seen a fistful of dollars. You never make fun of a man's mule, it's the fastest way to end up in a coffin. Anyway, the mule didn't take too kindly to being laughed at and bit the man over his taunting. This man was enraged and beat the donkey within an inch of its life, at which point the mother of the family came out and started to pelt rocks at this strange traveling donkey hater. The man couldn't just leave well enough alone, because as legend goes, later that night he brought a posse back to come burn down the farmhouse and blocked up all the exits to burn them inside. All over a donkey, allegedly. The farmhouse went up in flames. The only survivor, tragically, was the wife who initially had come to the donkey's defense. As she ran out of the home, her skin soaked in flame, her hands melted down to little stubs, her face deformed, skin sagging off the muscle, crispy and black, long like a donkey's snout. She ran into the night and hurled herself into the Elm Creek, which is the last place anyone had ever seen her. Today, there's a bridge called Donkey Lady Bridge over Elm Creek, where locals claim that they've seen a creature with a donkey's face screaming at them from the window of their car. Legend has it that the spirit of the wife haunts this area and torments those who cross her bridge while grieving the unfortunate loss of her family.